Let's go out to the Toyota of Hollywood guest line. Shop over 1,500 Toyotas indoors in one of America's largest showrooms at Toyota of Hollywood on 441 between Hollywood and Sheridan. Heat dropped to 1-3 yesterday. They lose 98-90 to the Toronto Raptors, who improved to 2-2. So we'll talk a little more Heat here with a friend of the show, Locked On Heat host Wes Goldberg, joining us there. Wes, what's going on, man? How are you?
What's up,
I'm
Wes?
good. Thanks for having me, guys.
What if it? I guess after this, so Leroy and I both agree, no panic with a 1-3 start. But I guess if you had to rank number one concern thus far with the 1-3 start, what has it been?
Well, if you're going to call one person out, I think it's got to be Kyle Lowry. It just feels like the bounce back that the Heat wanted from him, it's just not really happening right now. I mean, you even look at the raw field goal attempts number, and they're lower than last year. His assists are lower per game than they were last year. This was a guy who was criticized for not shooting enough and not being involved enough in the offense last season, and he won a bounce back year. Pat Riley calling him out after the season, and he hasn't really bounced back. I think some of it is partly due to the new starting lineup with Tyler Herro involved and wanting him to be more of a playmaker too, but you just need more from Kyle Lowry, especially after a night like last night where, you know, his former protege, Fred VanVleet, is completely outplaying him for the Raptors in that win for them. So I would start with Lowry and then sort of a trickle down to the half-court offense in general.
Wes, is this a, new bodies and new situations thing, and they just need to figure it out? Because it seems like the last couple of years, they were able to start the season a little better because all the roles were definitive. Mm-hmm. And now you're moving parts around. You have a couple of guys who were supposed to kind of fill Tyler's role in the second group that aren't even playing yet, and Vic, and then we don't know what Yurtseven's going to be. But it just seems like they don't have the right combinations yet. And so it looks clunky at times.
I definitely think that's part of it, especially when you're trying to work Tyler Herro back into that starting lineup, and you've got guys sort of moving around, and it's just the starting group is a lot of pick and roll with Tyler Herro and Bam Adebayo, and that's not really the kind of offense that guys like Kyle Lowry and Jimmy Butler function best in too. So you're trying to figure out the best sort of rhythms for that starting group, and then to your point, Leroy, like on that bench unit, you don't have Victor Oladipo who's was supposed to kind of be that sixth man. He hasn't played yet all season as he's dealing with the knee tendinosis. And you hope that when you work him in, that second unit has more of identity too, because that bench has just been outscored basically in every game this season. And right. That's a big reason for some of their struggles too.
And that was Tyler's thing.
Yeah.
Right. So what are the chances if things don't work out that the best option they may have is to move Tyler back?
Yeah, I've seen that idea kind of floated about in social media and stuff. The one thing I would say is I think we put a little too much emphasis on what exactly the starting lineup is versus the bench lineup versus all these other things. Like, I think at some point Eric Spoelstra is going to have to stagger his starters a little bit more than he is. We're seeing through the first four games like a lot of bench mob minutes for a bench that's kind of incomplete, like we said, without Oladipo, without Yurtseven. So I wonder if at some point you get to more staggering where Tyler Herro is able to sort of function in that second unit without Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry. And it looks a little bit more like it did last year, even though he's obviously going to be starting games because he closed games last year too, right?
Right.
So really the only difference in that in that scenario would just be he's starting the game as well.
Wes, what have you made of these first handful of games for Bam? He had the weird opening night where he was missing a ton of dunks. Last night, a pretty aggressive night because he took 14 shots, but he was 4-14 from the field. Did get to the free throw line a bunch, but just overall, we were expecting a more aggressive Bam Adebayo. I think in their one win was the only one where he didn't take a ton of shots. So I guess just your impressions of him early on so far this year.
Look, I'm not freaking out about Bam offensively. The one weird thing about offensively, like I'm not going to get into like the specific stats because that's boring, but his like average depth of shot attempt is a little bit further away than it was last year. So you obviously want him taking as many shots at the rim. His dunks are slightly down per game than they were last year. It just feels like he's settling for that 3 to 4 to 5 foot like little push shot floater thing that he kind of goes to a little bit too often. But I think you could fix that by just doing your homework a little bit earlier on offense and just getting better position in the paint and by the rim. But defensively, he's been awesome. And they have needed him so bad defensively because the rest of that defense has not been up to snuff. Like when Bam is on the court for the Heat, they have what is the equivalent of the second best defensive rating in the league. When he is off, When he's off the court, it's the worst
Yeah.
defense in the league, and that's
Yeah.
and so I think that's my biggest concern is not really Bam, but Bam really being the only functional front court player on the entire roster right now. If you're not going to play Jovic at 19 years old, Dedmon has not been very good. Yurtsevic's been injured. And then you kind of go through the wings that they're playing at power forward, Caleb Martin, Haywood Highsmith. They're not really power forwards, right? They're playing out of position. So Bam being the only front court player that's even on this team available, that to me is the larger concern.
When everybody's healthy, you think they give Jovic some run? Or do they go big Yurt and Bam? Because that's kind of what they were trying to get to in the preseason to see what it was going to look like.
Yeah, I think we're going to see Yurt and Bam together at some point. They, for whatever reason, I'm not really sure why, but Spoelstra doesn't want to play Bam and Dwayne Dedmon together, but he's okay playing Bam and Omer Yurtsevic together. They got the reps in training camp and in the preseason together, so I think we'll see them experiment a little bit with that, only because they kind of have to. And I do think we'll see Jovic at some point. I just don't think that they want to throw a 19-year-old. I know everybody keeps saying, hey, you're 1-3 after 4 games at home, but those 4 games at home were against 3 playoff teams. You played Toronto twice. So I don't think they wanted to throw Jovic into the fire against really good teams right away.
Yeah, it's also playing against men.
It's also tough because, like, I think last night, if he wasn't suspended, I feel like that would have been a good game for him because they were so shorthanded. It just happened to be unfortunate he didn't know the rules that you're not allowed to leave the bench.
Don't worry. At some point during the season, the Heat are going to have 8 men available.
His quote was
happens every year.
His quote was so adorable, though. He goes, "I was trying to help my friend."
I love him, man. He's so funny. He really is like all of 19 years old, isn't he? He definitely learned though. What did that cost him? Like 15 grand? I think he learned the rules.
Oh, yeah, that is a tough one. But I think the thing is, like, I definitely didn't think going into this we were going to see a ton of him, but I think he showed a lot of his basketball maturity in the preseason. I just think that's going to be a hard thing to ignore if things do continue to go this way. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you. Jay Crowder is kind of the name that's always still lurking out there because of his comfort with this team. He's been very open on social media that he'd love to come back here. He says yesterday on social media, coming back soon, basically, and half the team is liking it on Instagram. Do you see a Jay Crowder reunion in the future? And do you think that would matter? Do you think that would fix a lot of the issues?
I think it's definitely possible. I still struggle to figure out how it's going to happen. You can't, everybody wants to throw Duncan Robinson into that trade, but that becomes really difficult for Phoenix because they're a team that's up for sale. Robert Sarver's trying to sell the team. They're already in the luxury tax. If you do a Duncan Robinson for Crowder thing straight up, you're just adding a bunch more money onto their bill, and that makes it a little thing. So it just doesn't seem like they want to do that. But there's ways to sort of figure out that trade, although I do feel also like if that trade were going to happen, I feel like it would have already happened. And it just hasn't. So the other option is, okay, Phoenix trades Jay Crowder into, I don't know, let's call it San Antonio's cap space. And then San Antonio buys him out. And then Jay Crowder's free to sign anywhere. And you got to feel like the Heat would be the favorite in that scenario.
Yeah. I mean, like, I that's the one thing I would say is, like, I don't think, I didn't think that I would miss the PJ Tucker thing that much, but I do feel like just some of the lulls in these games.
Yeah.
Like PJ Tucker, he just he just doesn't let that happen. And I would be wary, obviously, of paying him because he is old, but man, it just felt like when you needed those like offensive rebounds or little tip plays to just get going, he just wouldn't let this team let up. And I do feel like, I don't know, Wes, there's just been some times of lax early on in the season where they've let quarters get away from him.
And even offensively too, like when they would go through the dry spells last year, a lot of times they would take Bam out when he would needed his rest, and then they would put PJ Tucker in at center. They don't have that small ball option this year. You know what I mean? We've seen minutes here and there of Haywood Highsmith at center. That did not go awesome. And so, yeah, you're missing that kind of other look offensively. Eric Spoelstra kept talking about last year's team and even this year's team in the preseason, how versatile this team is. It doesn't strike me as a very versatile group whatsoever.
No.
And that to me is the biggest problem. I don't know that Crowder fixes that. You could play Crowder at center if you really wanted to in a pinch. I do think Heat fans forget how streaky he was as a three-point shooter. We sort of remember the run-up in the bubble finals and then how bad it was in the NBA finals from three-point range for him. But it would be helpful because he's at least an actual power forward. And it would also put Caleb Martin back onto the bench unit too. And I think they've kind of needed his energy coming off the bench, and they obviously haven't had it because he's been starting.
How much do you think, though, one of the other things that was thought of going into this year is going to be maybe more of an offensive focused team, and they haven't hit 3-point shots. I mean, it's been a situation like last night, 8 of 34. They had looks. I mean, how many games are Max Strus is going to go 8-0 of 8 from 3-point range?
Right.
Like, do you think this is a case of like they set some good things up last night? It was just a case of it was Brick City.
I think a little bit of that too. I was with you. I thought, like, look, you're going to lose PJ Tucker. You're going to slide back a little bit defensively, probably. But even if you're still top 10 defensively, because they were top 4 last year, if you could kind of float your offense a little bit and get into the top 10 offensively, where they were in the middle of the pack last year, that kind of balances everything out. That has not been the case right now. They're the 20th ranked half court offense in the league, and I do think part of it is because of I do think it's a little bit of Brick City, to use your term there, because the looks are good. Max Strus, like you said, is just missing a ton. Kyle Lowry is missing a ton of open shots too. Duncan Robinson has been sort of every other game early in the season, but this is the team that led the league in 3-point shooting percentage last year, and they've been near the bottom in the league this year. So I do think some of that is just going to be a little bit more of a reversion to the mean. At some point, those shots are going to just go in, but like, it also sort of feels like Spoelstra can't find a rhythm because his best 3-point shooters are not his best defenders. His best defenders are not his best 3-point shooters. And that's why I kind of go back to the versatility thing. They're not versatile. It's kind of a team of specialists, and Spoelstra is trying to figure out which specialist he needs in which scenario and in which pocket of which game. And it's just hard to find a rhythm generally when you kind of have to operate that way.
It seems if they go defense, they can't score a lick. And if they go offense, they can't stop anybody.
Exactly.
That's a terrible spot to be in. But it's early. It's early in the season, so they'll figure it out. But it's going to probably require, like you said, Wes, kind of staggering the starting lineup a little bit more so that you can have either scoring or defense in every segment of the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Talking to Wes Goldberg, host of Locked On Heat, does a great job covering the team. Wes, before we get you out of here, just early impressions of the Tyler Herro starting season. We saw a lot of elements of his game last night with the rebounding. He looked tremendous, but how have you liked or not liked Tyler Herro in the starting lineup so far?
I actually think it's maybe the one positive that you could really draw from the beginning of the season is I think it looks good. He seems comfortable there. I know that it seems like Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry are still trying to adjust around Tyler Herro in that starting lineup, but Kyle Lowry's numbers are slightly down. They need to go up. Jimmy Butler's numbers are the same as last year, so it really hasn't had an impact on him statistics-wise. But and then defensively, I thought Tyler Herro was held up really well. Like in the beginning of that game against Toronto, they just had Pascal Siakam just targeting Tyler Herro every time down the court in the first half. And then by the end of the game, Siakam kind of just stopped doing that. The Raptors just sort of stopped doing that, maybe because they just got away from their offense, but also maybe because they realized, we're not getting what we thought we were going to get from this matchup either. So I think that's it. To me, it's been positive with Tyler Herro, even though there's still a little bit of an adjustment.
Yeah, I saw that against the Boston game too. Like they were doing that with Tatum and Brown. Like they were trying, and he held up pretty good early on. Like they obviously got to their stuff late, but I kind of like that idea that they're giving him, like, just throw him to the fire because they're going to do that in the playoffs with him anyway.
Yeah, that's the only way to get better defensively is to get those reps in. I think, like, to your point, in the playoffs, we're going to look back at this point of the season and be like, wow, those defensive reps, like just drawing Siakam and Tatum and Jaylen Brown and these guys over and over again, that's going to just help him.
Best way where people can go find you, Wes. Does a great job covering the Heat for Locked On Heat. Best way people can find your work, Wes.
Twitter at WC Goldberg, and then follow Locked On Heat on all the social accounts at Locked On Heat, and then on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, man. Appreciate the time. See you back at the arena.
Thanks, guys.
There you go, Wes Goldberg. We'll take a break. Hour 2 coming up next.